Good morning, everyone. I'm Cheryl Jordan, superintendent of this most wonderful, outstanding school district, Milpitas Unified. Thank you to each of you who are here this morning on a Saturday, the last week of school, and here to learn about AI and where we're going for the future, and especially the impact that it has on our lives and what we want to see for our children and also for ourselves as a community. So in the room, we have some people that have jobs that impact all of us. So I just want to recognize that. And I'll start first, before I go to the panelists, I'll start with our board member, Anu Naka. I saw her. Here she is, right in front of me. We also have a representative from Senator Aisha Wahhab's office, Leica. And we have our board president, Min No, who just walked in. We also have the CEO of the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, Dr. Lisa Andrew. And if there's anyone else who has something that impacts all of us. Oh, all right. Well, certainly, each one of you as a parent, as a caregiver, as a community member, as a student, you have huge impact in our city and in our school district and in our community and in our valley. So it's wonderful to see all of you here, and I would like to get us started by first introducing our panelists. And I'd also like to note that we have Mr. Tim Alcorn, who is recording today's Fireside chat so that we can share that with the public, and also you'll be able to see it again. And at the end of our conversation, we'll have something called a thought exchange, which will ask for your thoughts, questions, ideas, because this is just the inaugural conversation in MUSD. We're going to have a symposium in July, and what you share with us in the thought exchange will greatly guide what we do on that day. So let's get started. Sitting before you, we have about 100 years of experience in education. If you think about that, 100 years of experience in education, education has progressed pretty much the same way for a very long time, a couple centuries. However, in just the last 2010, even the last year, it's dramatically being impacted by the change that's happening all around us. And AI is one of those really outstanding changes that just has so many incredible opportunities, as well as things for us to consider around safeguards and what we need to do as a society in making sure that we are being critical thinkers in what we see and what we do with social media and also with the other avenues that AI comes into our lives. So I would like to introduce Dr. Victor Lee. He is a member of the Stanford faculty. He also leads the AI education for the accelerator learning at Stanford. We have our tremendous educator, Victoria Salas Salcedo. And you might have seen, if you look at educational magazines, you might have seen an article about her work in the classroom. She's been working with AI for 3 years over at Rancho Milpitas Middle School. But that's just a natural thing for Ms. Salcedo. She has always been an innovator in our district, leading our work in working with students who are learning English as a second language at the 7th and 8th grade level, also leading in our teaming in so many other ways. And we have our director, Chen Song. Chen has come to us through industry, and he is not only an industry leader who also has sat on several different advisory boards, including Google and Cisco. He is an experienced teacher, and most importantly, he is one of our leaders here in the district and always looking 10 to 20 years out, and thus keeping us in Milpitas Unified ahead of the curve. And then we have a trustee, Chris Norwood, who also has tremendous experience in education, not only because he, like all of us, was a learner here in Milpitas Unified and a longtime community leader, but he also leads through an organization that he founded and leads called the Silicon Valley Bay Area Tutoring Association. He is a leader across the state as a board member and has been named the California School Boards Association Board Member of the Year for the state. He is currently sitting on the State Advisory Committee for the California School Boards Association on AI. And so each one of these individuals is greatly excited, passionate about innovation, and AI is just the next thing that's come along on their plates that they're leading forward. So let's go ahead and start with our questions, and I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to first share about AI in your context and where you see it in the context of education. And we'll go ahead and start with Ms. Salcedo.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I, as Cheryl said, am a classroom teacher. I've been teaching since 2006 in a couple of different contexts, but currently I am in 8th grade English language arts classroom, and I have been utilizing AI primarily to try to improve the writing process and the instruction of writing and the feedback cycle, because as we all know, getting feedback on writing is critical for moving forward. So I've been piloting different things and trying to find the best way to reach the most students with the limited amount of time that we have as classroom teachers.
Oh, we had one here. Morning. Thank you for being here. My role as the director of tech and dabble in other subjects essentially is to simplify a lot of the AI concepts here in our community, and then also to make sure that we're connected with technologists as well as policymakers and our own educators to make sure that we're able to integrate those in an equitable and an inclusive way. So what that means is, think of like part of my role as a city planner or the transportation department to make sure that all roads are getting to all the rural areas as well as the city areas, as well as being ADA compliant, so that all these people who'd like to get from point A to point B can get there effectively and efficiently and without any barriers.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Jordan. Before I talk about my role in the space, again, I want to thank you all for being here at the MUSD Innovation Campus. For those of you that are aware, we started this project in 2018 when the residents, the voters, passed that we wanted to expand our education system. And what you see here is, what you're in is part of phase one of this campus. Over the next several years, you'll see more things being added to this campus for the future generations of Milpitas students. We're super excited about what we have to offer, and this first AI conversation will be a part of that, because we also see that within this campus, where we have a lot of new things, we'll also be able to bring new ideas and new innovation so that we can support not only our secondary students, but our adult learners, our English language learners, and then some of the partners that we have in the Santa Clara County. So as Superintendent Jordan had mentioned, I'm currently involved in the I'm currently elected to the school board in the city of Milpitas, but also being involved with the California State School Boards Association. There is a lot of conversation up and down the state about artificial intelligence. There is some fear, there is some anxiety, there is excitement, there is concern for our English language learners, and everyone is trying to figure out how to navigate where policy comes in so that we don't stifle creativity, but where does also compliance come in so that we can make sure that our children have the opportunity to become their best learners. And as the conversation continues, we'll get a little bit more into that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank Thank you very much for having me. So, as Superintendent Jordan had mentioned, I am a professor over at Stanford University, housed in the Graduate School of Education, also leading the AI and education initiatives for the Accelerator for Learning. So, in that capacity, what we're really leaning on is Stanford's patterns of innovation and research and development to bring together people from around campus, so that way the computer scientists are talking with the educators who are talking with the sociologists to understand what are some of the best pathways and some of the most exciting opportunities with respect to AI that would be responsive to what really happens in the classroom, which means you have English language learners, you have students with different abilities and different experiences. You have teachers from the whole spectrum in terms of where their comfort is with respect to the technology and how much space and capacity they have for changing what they're doing in the classroom. So leading that, which we do through internal grant programs, convenings with national and state leaders. And then as a researcher myself, I have my own portfolio of research and development projects, including those that look at what data we have about academic integrity as it relates to artificial intelligence. So whether or not, is the sound coming in okay on this? Okay. Whether or not we're seeing increases in cheating amongst students, given the ease of being able to produce compelling texts on demand. Also researching what teachers are worried about, what questions they have that they may not be comfortable articulating in faculty meetings, but being able to share anonymously with us. Also looking at this broader issue of AI literacy in terms of what does the public and what do people think about AI and how it works, and how does that affect the ways in which they're making their own decisions about it, or what opportunities they see or what limits they see, because it's not a neutral tool. It's a very exciting tool, but there are risks or harms and biases and exclusion. So right now is a really exciting time for all of us to be involved in the conversation early on and not be caught, on our heels with respect to what's happening, and hopefully leading in that space.
Great. And Dr. Lee, since you have the microphone, could you tell us, build more on what you're talking about and what you think the impact of AI will have on the economy in the next 5 years? And I'd like to also hear from our other panelists about your thoughts on AI and its impact on our economy for the next 5 years.
Absolutely. Artificial intelligence, in education, we hear a lot about a new buzzy technology quite frequently. It's almost this very predictable cycle. But I would say artificial intelligence, while there is going to be a huge hype with it, it is one that is going to have lasting impact and staying power. I don't know if we can find exactly the right metaphor for it, but people have likened it to the printing press. I would say think about it as the automobile and the interstate, transportation system. Thinking about it as the internet. So this is an infrastructural change. And when you change and open up all new sorts of infrastructures, that is absolutely going to have impact on the economy. There's some ways that we can predict in terms of how it's going to increase efficiency, potentially bring more economic opportunity, but it's also going to change what sorts of jobs. So if we put to the automobile, we now have mechanics, we now have other sorts of services, we now have concern about fuel and energy and other sorts of support technologies, in addition to people who are transporting goods and transporting people and helping to collect data and use this as part of everyday life. So when we think about the economy, I think that there's no job that is going to be sequestered from AI. There will be changes to varying degrees. That means nature of work is going to change. I think it's an exciting opportunity, but just like any of those metaphorical big innovations that are infrastructural, there's going to be a lot of learning curves involved. Education is going to change. College is going to change. First jobs, career changes, where we work, it's all changing. So I do think it's a positive overall, but there will, of course, be transition to be done.
All right, so I'm seeing this on a micro level of how the changes are direction. how the changes are already impacting my classroom. Yesterday, I had a conversation with a child, and I had him come over. It's the end of the semester, so projects are due, grades are due. There's no time for rewind. We're moving forward. So I noticed something in his project, and I called him over, and I said, "Hey, if you're going to use AI, use it better." Because he put into whatever platform he used what I think he thought he understood from the prompt and asked it to produce that and copied and pasted it into his project. And it was not at all what I had asked for, because I crafted that project in a way where he would have to use offline resources in combination with his knowledge in order to produce the desired result. And what he produced didn't have any of that offline information. It was just generated and really peripheral to what I had originally asked. And I told him, you can use this to generate ideas. You can use this to help you with your wording, but you still have to know what you're doing. And it's clear that you didn't. I'm not telling you to stop using AI to help you with your projects, but use it better. And he was like, oh, okay. Okay. So he accepted the grade that he had earned, which was not great. And hopefully he learned a lot more from that project than I had intended for him to learn in the first place. I can see that the kinds of teaching that we do in the classroom are going to have to meet AI head on. But in order for that to happen, teachers are going to have to go back to that playfulness of learning and curiosity, and have to drop the fear behind like what this is going to do, and also be okay a little bit with not controlling everything. Teachers are really, really good at needing to control every single aspect of their classroom, from where everybody sits to what time we do this to where you put the paper to minutia, in order to get these well-oiled machines and get the kids through and learn everything we've got to learn. And it's a lot. So I really think that being okay with exploring and trying things and learning from those mistakes, and not making everything so high stakes, but being open to just learning in and of itself, is really going to be the difference between educators that are able to teach the kids to utilize AI and those that will force kids into using it for things like cheating and rob students of the learning opportunity, right? Algorithmic thinking and coding and things like that really need to be emphasized earlier, because students need to be able to decipher the difference between synthetic and real, and know, when to apply these technologies, because they're incredibly useful and they're incredibly valuable learning tools, but we have to learn how to wield them ourselves before we can get our students to be able to do so in a meaningful way.
So it's a super exciting time in the economy, but it depends on where you are and what your job category is, and whether your salary depends on you knowing that information, right? Because if it eliminates your job or makes it and diminishes it, then there's a constant challenge of trying to upkeep with that technology. So you're like, hey, I don't see it, until you have to confront the reality of this may take your job. Now, for example, I'm going to take you to a very high level back in 1900s. How many farmers, anyone in the audience, how many farmers did we have in 1900 for 100 million people? Farmers. We had 100 million people here in the United States. How many farmers did we have? Farming. Yes or no? 80 million. Okay. 30% of the population is the correct answer. If I had a prize, you'd get it. So you're looking at, right, 30% of your population in farming. Anyone care to guess how many, what the percentage is today? 1.4%. For 400 million people, right? So today we're able to feed literally the rest of the world with our current farming technologies here in the US. So it's no longer a hunger food production problem, it is a logistics problem. How do we get food into different areas? It's a political problem, right? Removing some of those barriers. Now, with the economy today, NVIDIA just demonstrated taking the entire contents of the internet through its backplane in 1 second. 1 second, the entire content. And they're driving down the computing price, the nominal computing price down to 0. Imagine if all of our students in the very near future will have access to almost unlimited computing power. What would that do? In just the US, never mind the rest of the world, right? It's almost like we're in some countries, in developing world, they went from having no phones to all of a sudden cell phones. Being able to not communicate and guess, and for many of us in this room, pre-cell phones, what did you do with your, what was your childhood like?
Had to be home before the street lights came on.
That's right, that's right. Or somebody yelled at you and be like, I don't think that was my mom. Right? Or when you left for somewhere, you're like, I'll be back. And then as parents, you're like, hope they make it back. Right? It's, there wasn't the constant pinging of communication. So the economy excitedly will change in very different ways. I'll give you 2 concrete examples of where it affects just everyday workers. So for example, my mom was having her plumbing done. Roto-Rooter guy comes in, right? And she sends me this video. He's like, look at this. He's going, and he can magically tell like where the clogging is, how far it might be, and what the remedy should be right on the screen. And I'm like, that's pretty cool stuff. Using, later, that I found out, some of machine learning and AI embedded in the tool. Second one, I was at an AI conference, just walking to the place, and essentially I ran into this the security person who's going around doing an RFID scan on the building. There's these little tags in downtown San Diego, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh man, and this they want me to like scan this, so for me to take a look at those, and they're actually seeing where I am, how many buildings that we've scanned, and how many buildings are safe, so they could see when a vandalism has occurred, or am I doing my job correctly? And I'm logging these things in, and then they're sending me a summary report." And then he says, "You know, I wasn't really interested in AI, but you know, I'm taking some YouTube courses, and I think I know more than I thought." How significant is that in taking this person, come to later find out, barely graduated from high school, to all of a sudden realize that his job is more than his job, but more importantly, he is greater than who he thought he was. All right? The economy will change in profound ways, not only because it elevates our already existing tech workers with, or already resourced people with more technology, but it basically takes people with very little knowledge and gets them up to speed super fast, and then it elevates them as a human being.
You know, following Chin is always like, you know, it's following Chin. But we have these conversations, Chin and I, and then the superintendent and I, about Milpitas Unified School District and the future of it all the time. And so this is the kind of thinking that is in charge of the school district for Milpitas Unified. As I think about 5 years in the economy, Superintendent Jordan had mentioned, I'm a longtime resident. I've been in Milpitas since I was in the 3rd grade. So I've seen the city change. I've seen all the tech companies come in. I've seen the agriculture, McCarthy Ranch. Yes, it used to be all farmland, peaches, and all of that stuff, transform into this very, very rich tech area. And then I've seen a large demographic shift in the city of Milpitas to include a lot more different cultures with a lot of other different backgrounds. And so when I think about the future of the economy 5 years from now, I'm thinking about the future of the economy 5 years from now in Milpitas and where our children and our adult learners will be. And from some of the things that you heard from the colleagues, I will summarize. 1, everybody should become familiar with some form of AI officially. We always talk about in Milpitas Unified School District about being lifelong learners. AI should be telling you, all the adults and all the young people in the room, I need to learn about this. I need to invest my time in it because it will have an impact on my economic future. For the adults that are involved in tech or other industries, you should also be very, very aware that there are people in your organization thinking about not necessarily downsizing, but becoming more efficient as an organization. And as they become more efficient as an organization, the first casualty are people. So continuing to think about how you're going to reinvent yourself, how you're going to become more familiar with AI, and the common platform out there now is ChatGPT, but we're on GPT-4, but we've been using AI for quite a while. If you've noticed, if you've had Gmail and you've had spell check or you've had Word, there's a lot of AI that's already in places. So to talk about AI and the economy as far as being far away, think about how much more efficient you've already become at your job, and how that has had a positive effect on the economy. Now, on the other side of that, if you don't have access, if you're not familiar with technology on a daily basis, if you don't have, if you're not digitally literate, the gap is going to widen, and part of our society is going to be left far behind only because they don't have access. They don't have the digital access. They don't have the digital literacy. And believe it or not, leaving people behind in Silicon Valley, everybody gets pulled back. It's not that we can all get better and then hope that our English language learners or the folks that don't have access are going to be able to figure things out. They all need our support. I care deeply about the economy in the city of Milpitas. I care about the residents, the parents, as well as the children in Milpitas when it comes to the economy. I will tell all of the adults, allowing your children at home to experiment and play around with AI, you have to regulate that because there are bad actors out there. And with your children using your computers in your house, you're allowing them to potentially have people come in and learn about your own personal savings or anything that you're doing as well on those same computers. So AI, and that has an effect on the economy as well. If you think about identity theft, you think about all the different things that are going on that could potentially affect your personal economy. So yes, I'm super excited about AI. All the things that have been said are going to be very, very beneficial, but we can't forget the fact that there are bad actors out there. And just allowing our kids to experiment with AI is not enough. We have to be a part of that. We have to be learning with them as well to make sure that we keep our data safe. And I'll conclude with this one quick story. I'm familiar with, my mom is 81 years old. She is starting to use her cell phone. She's starting to text. She's starting to use her computer more. And she's been getting calls from PG&E saying that we need you to send us a check right now for your payment. She had never gotten these calls before, but because she had started to get on the internet and started to do more research, now she's being targeted because her general information is out there from many, many years ago. So those are some of the concerns. So I think about the economy, again, I care about Santa Clara County, But I know that when Milpitas has a thriving economy, when our adults are well informed, when our children are being educated by our education system in the way that it needs to on a safe side, but also a visionary experimental side, then we're going to have to take the wins when we get them, and we're going to have to recover from the losses when we experience them.
There's so much each of you has brought up. I have a million things swirling in my head. I want to ask, by show of hands, how many of you know somebody who has been scammed, as Trustee Norwood was talking about? How many of you have received those calls or those texts inviting you to do something that gives up your information? Yeah. So we do have to be aware of AI, and we do also have to be aware that when we're involved in social media, that the AI generates other pieces of information our way that it thinks we might like, and then we end up boxing ourselves into one perspective only. Those are two areas, as our panelists, and particularly Ms. Salcedo, alluded to, which is we also need to make sure that our learners understand how to be critical about what it is that they're accessing and they're seeing, so that they know, as Ms. Salcedo said, what's synthesized and what, or I think that was Mr. Song, what's synthesized and what's not. Another piece of AI is how do we use it to create? And as you said, panelists, it is important that our students have access to AI so they could be ahead. A proud mama moment. My son has been working for 10 months now at Edwards Life Sciences. And because he knows how to use AI to ask questions in order to do coding, and he also knows how to look at all of those spreadsheet things, he has been teaching across the globe. He's been teaching other finance people how to use this new spreadsheet app because it's some magical thing that they don't understand. But because he's a 23-year-old kid who knows how to do that stuff, he's now the expert of only 10 months. So it's really important, as an example, that we continue to use the technology that's at our fingertips, and we use it in a way that allows us to guide our kids and also allows them to develop those experiences so that they know how to use it better, use it well. At the national level, just as at the state level, at the national level, our legislators, our president, are looking at different ways that do they regulate AI? Do they not regulate AI? Representative Khanna talked about, well, maybe what we need to do is we need to incentivize employers to figure out how to use AI in a way that benefits the employees and creates new jobs rather than eliminating jobs. Because right now in our capitalistic society, we're looking at how do you make a profit? And sometimes that means eliminating a job and replacing it with machine learning, which is important. And then how do we also build something new that we weren't able to do before? And part of those AI caucuses that the Senate is helping have yielded different types of quotes, such as this one from Senator Heinrich. One of the questions that I'm asking myself is, what's the threshold at which you begin to regulate something? There are going to be applications for AI that are very low risk, and we don't want to stifle innovation. But there are also going to be applications that have very real-world consequences, such as a platform that is going to drive a car. What does his remark bring to mind in your context for policy and education around AI?
I think we're doing the line sequence. So I really appreciate the perspective that you've brought in, and I personally understand policy as at times a blunt instrument for complex situations. And what I would be most concerned about is we talk about AI like it's a very uniform thing, but you've already heard all of these different situations, whether it's your student who could use it even in more smart ways, whether it's your mother's plumber, whether it is your mother receiving messages. But to say, oh, this is the rule for AI, and not consider that when Netflix recommends things for me to watch, or when I see something on social media, that AI is involved in that, and it's not strictly when I open up a chatbot that I'm dealing with AI, it has me concerned that policy can be too blunt with respect to that. I do think we need to consider, especially, living in this country with the set of values that we bring in and what, motivated my own family, generation ago to immigrate here, what I think everyone feels like their efforts and desires are for their children and future generations is this creating opportunity? Is this creating the opportunity to realize your full self and have security and stability? And what are the things we think are the most important? A lot of that is, trusting ourselves to be able to make the decisions that we feel are the right decisions. So regulation that would tend to elevate the recognition that people want to be empowered to make decisions is important. But again, cautiousness with the blunt instrument, and that we can always improve. And that may mean that there's some mechanisms to be able to find out more about what's under the hood of different systems so that they can be made better. So I would just say that as far as policy goes, knowing what are our fundamental values with respect to that, such as, our agency and the ability to have access and change things for the better, are key. But I would really caution, and I think it's critical that when we have conversations with policymakers and leaders, that we give space to have a substantive conversation, so we don't just say all of AI must have this kill switch or something of that sort, because we can find a zillion scenarios where that is not quite the right version. And for those of us who've worked in industry and we all try to comply and play by the rules, some of them we know get burdensome or hindrance and create needless work in service of what's intended to be a good. So we just need to build in that continuous check and not be too blunt with respect to what the rules are.
Yeah, so building off of what Dr. Victor said, I am kind of in this weird place. I mean, middle school. Okay, hang on. Let me rephrase that. So the place that I inhabit in education is the end of childhood, effectively, and the beginning of adulthood. And I see that some of the regulations and conversations about what should be allowed and what shouldn't are happening right before my eyes. So I was lucky enough to be able to pilot Conmigo this semester from Khan Academy. And this is kind of what I had been looking for a long time, because it's what I consider to be AI with guardrails for our learners. And so I want them to use AI. I want them to explore. I want them to try to push its limits, honestly. But there is that far limit that I don't want them to push, right? And we're kind of in this push and pull and with in many different areas in middle school, right? With boundaries and with rules and with what's allowed and what's not, and is this okay? And over-regulating AI is going to stifle innovation. There's nothing, there's no mincing words there. But when it comes to our learners, I think that having a slow rollout and having some tools that are AI with guardrails are going to be critical to their development, right? So when it comes to adults, like I'm all for the Wild West, like just figure it out and then the dust will settle. But when it comes to like early education and even secondary learning in a controlled environment before they're able to branch out is really important to me. And so I need to be able to provide my learners tools that allow them to push limits but have that bumper at the end when, okay, this is as far as you are allowed to go. You've reached a point where you can't go past this. And then when they are ready to give them that freedom to explore, my main concern is that it's going to stop the momentum, right? So I don't know the answers. I know that when we do overregulate things, it's never for the better. And so I want to see researchers and lawmakers be curious and come into our environments and not with a lens of how can I stop the thing that I'm scared of, but tell me more, right? And be curious and find out the applications that we're using it for and what we need to change and where developmentally these kids need their guardrails so that it can be a useful tool in education. Beyond that is beyond my purview. And that's not for me to figure out. That's your that's your problem.
It's going to break the trend.
Not a problem. Thank you. So as Superintendent Jordan had mentioned, part of my role, besides being on the board of the Milpitas Unified School District, is to participate in conversation up and down the state around AI. And one of the biggest things that I've learned with talking to other school board members and even our local assembly member, senator, and even our congressmen is that they still don't know what they don't know about AI. And bringing it back down to a micro level, policy for a school district is the student handbook. That's policy. That's something that needs to be followed. The parent handbook, resolutions that the board makes for a school district. Those are policies, things that are supposed to be followed and adhered to by the school district. So while I hear the concerns of the senators, us being in a K-12 or TK through adult education space, knowing that we want to see it as a learning tool, what I look for in our policy or the policies that we're going to be looking to develop in the Milpitas Unified School District is going to be in partnership with the community. We're going to continue to have these discussions, and we're going to say, in the student handbook, there's going to be some information about AI, so our parents and students can't say, well, I didn't know, or that doesn't apply to me. In our parent handbook, there'll be information about AI and the things that the board will approve for our local community, and we'll be paying attention to what's happening nationally. If you do a Google search now on AI policy nationally or federally for the United States, there's some guardrails, there's some guidelines out there, but they're very, very broad because they're still trying to figure it out. But ultimately, we know, living in this region of California, is that we're going to experiment with things. We're going to push the button on things. We're going to go as far as we can, and then pull back when we may have gone too far. So when I think about policy and what the concerns are, they're absolutely right. And we get a chance to be a part of what happens in Milpitas Unified. So if there's something that comes up that you are aware of when it comes to AI, we want to know that, because then we'll be able to figure out how to apply it to our local school district to make sure that we can serve all of our kids, our inclusive learners, our English language learners, our underserved populations that come in. One of the things that we have learned about, for example, Conmigo that's evolving, is that sometimes the questions that the kids are putting in, because of their ability to speak native English, what comes back to them isn't clear because they're not speaking academic English. So we recognize right away, if you don't have a mastery of English language, academic English, then the AI tools that you want to use or you're trying to use isn't serving you the same way as the kid next door that has access to those types of things. So what types of policies are we going to be involved in that we can uplift other people in our community that may not have had the same opportunities. Chin gave the story about the person in the buildings, how he said, wow, I know a lot more than I didn't know. Well, how can we create policies to empower people to realize that this is a tool that I need to learn to use even better? That's what's going to help the city of Milpitas and our region to be economically strong. And I'll just wrap up with this. We all know, or some of you may not know, is that in the early 90s, when the SiliconValley.com era started happening, there was a lot of brain drain from our higher ed institution. People that thought about careers in education and other places went into tech. They didn't go into education. And now here we are again with AI, with the opportunity to say, how can we strengthen our local economy? And what policies can I be a part of in the city of Milpitas that could also be paid attention to by others so that we can move the needle to uplift not only those that have, but those that need more, because we're all a part of, you know, what we call here, what we are here in Milpitas and Silicon Valley. So the policy has a lot of different layers to it, but we also want to look for policies that uplift people and open up the doors to give them more opportunities to be successful in our region, because we need everybody that is here to have the opportunity to stay here.
All right, so I think in terms of policymaking, it is important that we think about context, right? So I'm 100% for contextual policymaking. However, it being a pretty blunt instrument, it's oftentimes difficult to do so. So then do you take the architectural approach of just laying down the grass, seeing where people walk, and depending upon how the sun shines during that day or time of the year, then a pathway that is beautiful will appear, right? So right now we're in that stage of like, what do we do, right? And so how do we build this type of context? Well, in our approach is to go and provide these tools for our students, and then see where the pathways might lie. And then go ask the teachers, be like, hey, we noticed like 80% of your kids are using this tool, and we notice you're not. It's a different type of conversation, right? Then we have no data at all. And so having the richness of what the data sets might be is super important. And then going back to the roads analogy and why I believe in like contextual policy making is because on some roads it's super safe. You're going slow, right? You don't need too much guardrails unless it's off of a cliff and it's a one-way road that you don't know what's coming on the other side. And then you want that guardrail to be there, right? For example, in some of the tools that we use, it'll alert teachers if they try to ask like some questionable questions like how to build a bomb, right? It's like, it'll come back and say, hey, you know, it's, we can't help you with that. And our teachers get notified so we can have a conversation on, oh, you mean in chemistry, how do explosive materials work, right? So you can word it in a different way and get similar results, but now it's on prompting. If we're going fast down a freeway, right, that is also curved, for those of you guys who've driven Midwest, it's just, or North Dakota, it's just literally straight. You can go 70, in I-5, right? It's 75. Here, same interstate, same taxpayer-funded roads, 65. Now, does anyone go 65? Do we do contextually based driving here, right? And so when we think about policy, yes, there's a stated policy, but what is the actual practice? And is that practice safe? Right? I remember when 101 was a 2-lane road, and that, it was, what was it, like 55, right? But I was also riding in the back of my dad's truck without any type of restraining device. Pre-seatbelts, you guys, pre-seatbelt days. And then we were thinking about policy at the district level and even at like the state levels. When we're thinking about policy, we also have to remind ourselves that our parents under the age of 31 have never experienced a school without Google. And I'm not even rolling the clock back for Yahoo, right? I'm not rolling the clock back for Excite, Ask Jeeves, or Web Crawler for those of you guys who's, right? And so because of that, even folks who are 38 and under may have never experienced a life before the Dewey Decimal System, which was required teaching in all of elementary school. And so what type of context are we thinking about, and where does it apply, and how might it benefit both not only our students, but also their thinking going forward, and ultimately what type of people do we want to inject into society?
So we've been talking about policy and guidelines way up at the macro level. But thinking about the companies like the French company Mistral or Meta or Google that are trying to outpace ChatGPT with development of things like tutors or chatbots or audio or even video recreations, what kind of guidelines, what kind of conversations can parents and caregivers or even educators have with our students in how to use those types of things?
I think we should break up the sequence. You go first.
Why not? All right, let's see. So, I think it depends on what you're trying to drive home, right? So, in my household, we're totally fine with tech. We do have a Wi-Fi that turns off at certain times of the day so that kids can unplug and actually sleep. And I do have content filters on, and I do what I can as a mother. But yeah.
We see you. We see you back there. We see that small hand.
Thank you. I'm not the only one.
Right? How many of you have filters as she described at home?
It's her.
Okay. So could you hold your hands up a little higher?
There we go.
Can everybody else look around and see where the hands are and your vulnerability in terms of 'cause it's serious business, and there are some folks that are listening to what's happening, and there are some folks that are ignoring it. And then when your child or you come and say there's something going on with your family because of X, Y, Z, and we have educators that want to educate, we're going to need your partnership in this. That was a perfect moment. I just had to chime that in, so thank you. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Norwood. So, try to do what I can as a mother. But there are unregulated tools in my household too. Like I tried to do kids YouTube as long as I could, but that became uninteresting, past the age of 5 to my children. And so we do have conversations about what they're seeing. I don't allow them to have devices in their rooms. They have to be out in the public space in my home, so that I could just kind of keep an eye on what's going on. And when I notice something that might, be false, I ask my kids about it. I say, what is that? And tell me more about that. And I try to get them to think through if what they're seeing is real, right? I don't come out and tell them right away, like, oh, that's fake. Don't believe in that, because I'm fallible. I'm wrong about things. And I want them, it's more important for me to get them to think and learn how to think critically about what they're seeing than it is for me to be the end-all, know-all of media literacy in my household. And so that same approach I try to take in my classroom, and teaching kids to think critically about what they're seeing, about what they're consuming, about what they're choosing to consume, whether or not they're fully aware that these are the choices that they're making, is intensely relevant to what we're experiencing as a society now with deep fakes and with AI generated voices, which has recently been a little bit more in the news thanks to Scarlett Johansson. And, learning how to think. Let me back up. Learning how to think is more important in my classroom than making sure we meet every single standard. Don't listen, put your because things move so fast that if I make sure that every single kid can identify, a literary element, things are going to speed past them and we're not going to have critical thinkers. I don't want to live in a society where everyone is purely a consumer of information. I want my students to be creators. I want them to be critical thinkers, and I want them to be able to criticize what they're seeing and deeply analyze, if what they're seeing is worthy of consumption even. So it starts at home. We need to be a little bit more careful about monitoring our students' consumption of media, or just having those conversations. It's kind of the same when kids are learning to read. We don't just set them with a book and hope that it's going to go well. We read with our kids. We should also consume media with our kids, and not just reruns of the A-Team, but we should let them explore and let them be interested in what they're interested in, and be curious. Be kind of a fly on the wall of what your kids are being exposed to, because I think that gives you more access to helping them engage with that media a little bit more critically.
Yeah, so I have my kids in the audience right there. It's Xavier and Vincent. Raise your hands. 10 and 12, both at Randall. And so I oftentimes bring them here, and also I brought them to like national conferences just so I can heat check myself and they can check me and be like, Daddy, that's what you do. Now that they can understand a lot of the things that they experience on a day-to-day basis. Like in our household, they have unfettered access. And so they can actually go to anywhere that they like, but akin to driving, it's almost like putting them through a safe driving school, which is give them the right training that's necessary. So you're going through the sites with them. If they see any objectionable content, and then you're saying, that one seems a little not appropriate for you, and then to say, this is when it might be appropriate, or you show them another one, be like, what do you think about this one? What do you do, right? And so you're building that self-awareness and self-resiliency, much like as driving in a car, right? It's you don't have rails everywhere, and at some point you're going to have to let that go. And so when you choose to let that go is up to, once again, context, right? How does your child react and also take action on the information that's given? And when do you feel comfortable, right, of letting them explore on their own? Because at some point, they will explore on their own, except for some of my colleagues. They're like, but they're still 31, and they're still in my house. And so it's, then you can set whatever guardrails you want, because if you're paying for the internet, then that's all you, right? But in other cases, like you have conversations around digital literacy, right, and digital citizenship. Like, what do you feel that is good for you? And also, remember, it depends on who you are and how you parent, and perhaps like your orientation towards certain things, like political affiliations, right? Or if you see certain things in a certain light, someone else might get offended. So you're like, oh no, don't look at that. But for you, you're like, hey, that's cool. right? But also teach them how the generalized society might look at those things, and then how might you be able to interpret? Because they're their own person, and they will form ideas, and the greatest like intelligence is like right here, right? And so, but all these tools will help them develop, once again, just like the security guy, just amplify their skills, right? Or in the bad actors, amplify the bad acting skills. But what you want to do is try to maximize as humanly possible while they're still under your guidance, to try to help them use these tools to amplify what they might be able to do. Just like putting a stool so that they can reach something slightly higher until they can actually do it by themselves, right? Because not all sinks are designed for little guys, right? It's they're all 36 inches or higher, right? The standard sinks, and chairs, right? My legs kind of dangle, right? Is this a no. Chris has no problems with that. So with that, I'll pass it on to Chris.
Superintendent Jordan, could you state the question one more time, please?
So as a parent or a caregiver, what would you recommend, or what do you suggest that they need to be able to do or know in guiding their children and using some of these new things, such as the chatbot or the audio or video creator that AI is capable of doing?
So I have two children, both one recently graduated college. And then my son is currently a sophomore. So their journey has been similar to the Chin's children in certain ways that have been brought places. They've been connected digitally since probably like 3 or 4 years old. Prior to me being on the board, I was involved in tech in the .com era. And so when I saw the opportunity to provide access to children very early on so that they would have an equitable opportunity at success in all spaces, I'm very proud to say that both of my children are comfortable in any room that they walk in, no matter what it looks like. And technology played a big part in that early on in their lives, because they saw that they had a vast amount of knowledge from their research and their experimentation, sometimes going off the cliff and us pulling them back, and then sometimes staying within the guardrails. So when I think about it as a parent, I think about, again, that regulation in the midst of all the work that we do, because we all know that we work quite a bit. We bring our jobs home with us. We're not just coming home and being parents, but we are being caregivers, husbands, wives, taking care of other folks. So our ability to have that high quality time with them always is limited. So we have to be mindful of how we take that time. And I will add to that, we also have to be mindful of how we invest our time. So when you first brought the question up, I was like, school site council, PTA. I was thinking about the organizations that they have on school campuses for parents, because if you want to know what's going on at your school, or if you want to have some influence on what's happening at your school that affects policy, you ask your principal. So what are you guys doing around AI? Or you ask other parents, because the network, I tell aspiring college high schoolers as well as college students, I'm like, your network is going to determine your net worth. So who you're able to communicate with, who you have in communication, who you have in your peer groups, is going to be very influential to who you are and how you respond. So not only because we realize that when you go home after work and close the door at your house, you're kind of on your own with your children. But if you're connected at your school site and have the ability to have those kind of conversations with other parents and to communicate with your principal, hey, these are some of the AI things that we're doing. What's happening in AI in the classrooms? What are your policies? Or what is your school site doing? What is the school district doing? That elevates the conversation for all of us. We do not want you to be alone in this, because I know that we always say culture of we, build a culture of we. We're building together. So your voices in these conversations at your school sites will not only help you at home, but it will help you with your children as well, because you'll gain a lot more insight from parents as well in your local community. You'll find like-minded parents. You'll find parents that don't agree with you, but at least you'll have all the information that some of the things that your kids are dealing with. So when I think about the context of that question, I think about what parents can do alone in the limited time that they have, and that is build relationships. But then in addition to that, also be a part of their school's community in some way, and continue to be a part of this work as we continue to build it, because I'm sure we'll be producing information, just like the California School Boards Association's task force that I'm on. It's going to be producing resolutions for school districts to consider. It is going to be producing lists of technologies that that districts are using across the state, which our director of IT knows quite a few of those as well, so that we can make sure that Milpitas Unified has the best opportunity to serve our kids in the most effective way, but we can't do it alone. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Lee, so we've heard from Mr. Norwood, Mr. Song, and Ms. Salcedo about the importance of being involved in what your child is doing with technology at home, the importance of building relationship and giving them opportunity to experience, experiment, and also discuss with parents what's happening and what they're seeing. And we've also heard about the value of building a network and having thought partners with other parents and other educators. What more would you add to that? And in addition to that, what AI tools, or what is it that you think students need to know now for AI and also in the future?
I'm a parent. I have 2 teen girls in public schools, proudly. And one of the things I've heard here a lot is, critical thinking. We want to make sure that our kids and everyone else around us are critical thinkers. But what is tricky about that is there's not like a specific, here's the critical thinking classroom lesson, take it and you're done. So I would encourage everybody here to move past critical thinking as like a specific knowledge set, but rather it's a way of being in your life. I don't want to get too professorial on all of this, but my doctorate's in a field called learning sciences, and we just really geek out on human learning. And public schools or schooling is a relatively recent human invention. Learning has happened for a very long time, and from your own experience, both on the receiving and the giving end, lots of it happens at home, and sometimes in these very unexpected ways. And so what I would encourage, first off, I do not have all the answers about parenting without question. But I also think if you look to just any sort of wisdom, what's the beauty of Wikipedia? I don't need to have all the answers. Collectively, people have information and they share it. So I would encourage you, take what I say with a grain of salt, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, because they're going to have some other tips and wisdom. But just, concrete things like, I think that voice assistants have slightly modernized, but we make a point whenever we get a new device to change the default voice, because I don't want my girls to think only women's voices are the assistant helper voices. That is not the message. And I tell them as such, and so we get creative with that. When my father, who, English is a second language, voice assistant doesn't quite pick up his speech, I say, obviously they just trained it on a very specific speech pattern, and so that way they get that message without me being super heavy-handed. Like, how did this get built? It does not necessarily serve everybody's needs or perspectives in there, and it's just a subtle thing. I don't say, hold on, time out, let's do a family lesson. It just comes up in the mention. We're driving in the car, and I say, I'm driving right now. I'm not going to pick up my phone. Can you get this map app up, because I like what they do better? But what they learn there is that different services can do different things. And so I'd just say, be transparent and include your kids in things. There's a lot that they're going to be picking up, and reflect that criticality, because I'd also think I don't like this service or this thing because I'm very concerned in terms of where potential harm is associated, or I just don't feel like supporting that entity. So that's what I would say in terms of be a critical way of being, modeling that, and having that be part of what you do. Now, as a parent, I would say I'm generally quite concerned about the misinformation and ability to make synthetic stuff. So, the way that comes out is, I have 2 teenage daughters. We're getting a lot of TikTok in the mix, and I also mentioned, because they ask about, the TikTok ban and why, and, I discuss it a little bit to the extent that they are still going to listen and their eyes don't glaze over. But they'll come in and say, there's this new thing, or I just found out this, and I'd say, that's interesting. Let's go check and verify. Let's go see what are the sources, and I'm going to show how I look at it. And they ask me a question that I don't know the answer. I say, well, let's look, and pull over the iPad, and I show how do I browse and how do I check for quality in there. And so, the big thing I'm especially concerned about is we're in super deep fake territory. November's around the corner, so this is going to get worse. Your mothers and other family members are going to get all these spam attacks and phishing attacks. So it's just, I'd say I'd be concerned that they don't think, it's just this chatbot AI. And if you even look at GPT 4.0, it's moving really fast. And so just trying to keep those lines open and say there's things that can get made here, and we need to be wise about it and how to be wise. And I show how to be wise and encourage that thoughtfulness. So, that's what I would add is just critical way of being as modeled from your own actions, and expressing, thinking aloud in front of your kids is is incredibly powerful, because they hear I don't want to add this spice. That's going to make it too hot. Just even those little things. That's how cooking wisdom comes along. That site is always questionable with their things. Let's take a look and see if other sites, it looks like it's general agreement. So just to model that is key. And I would say the misinformation and deepfakes is probably my number one concern. I also just communicate with them, too, in terms of what's my intent, where it's this would be fine to use AI on, because I think what's really important that you're learning here is this part, not the spelling and grammar for this particular assignment. But at other times, I'd say we need to use our heads, especially for that, so that way you don't make some of these mistakes and I'll tell them actual mistakes that I've made or others have made.
And how about what do you think children and youth and teens need to know about AI now and in the future?
I think they need to know that it is not sentient, because that's the media image that they get, and it's quite. It's not human. It does a great job at doing a lot of things that we can do, and that's pretty stunning. But it's not the Matrix or the Terminator yet. But it also, there. But I think understanding what that is, it can change very quickly in a generation. So just to understand it can or can't do these things. It's not thinking the way you and I think. And it's trained on data. And those data come from people, and people have complex histories, biases, what they give, what they don't give. There's privacy things, and really a lot of kids are like, whatever, take my data, just show me entertaining stuff. And it's true. I mean, it's not a bothersome thing for a lot of us who are concerned about privacy, but just making a parent, what can you figure out, and what do you want out there or not want out there, and having those conversations.
There was a couple of things that he touched on that I want to make sure don't get glossed over. Our younger children, if you use Alexa or Siri or any of those devices in your home, our younger children get used to that voice and the accuracy of that voice on the information because of the questions that are asked. As they get older, and when they hear devices like that, they're automatically going to assume, it was true when I was little. So now that I'm as an adult, I'm going to believe the devices the exact same way I did when I was little. So our children are being trained to trust a non-sentient on decision making, on how to do things. Extremely dangerous, to say the least. So being mindful of the fact that we're just in the, and Chin said this, and hopefully he gets a chance to bring it up. He says, we're seeing the worst versions or the earliest versions of some of these things right now. And so we can imagine how much better they're going to be and how much more influential they're going to be in the future. So I wanted to make sure that that point wasn't missed, and the fact that we are doing something right now in terms of AI that could be detrimental to our future generations, because they could listen, oh, well, Siri was nice to me and right all the time as a child, so I'm going to continue to believe what it says, and it's being programmed with human data. And one other point. Milpitas has always been a community, a diverse community of a lot of different ethnicities, nationalities, and we're all familiar with bad history books. We're all familiar with information that has been written in history by people that have not been accurate portrayals of other folks. That data is still out there in the universe. So we have the ability to help prevent some biases or fight implicit bias or subconscious bias by our ability to recognize that we still need to be involved as humans at every facet of the conversation when it comes to AI, when it comes to digital literacy, when it comes to media literacy. So I think those points need to be added to the conversation as well. So thank you for those.
I can go. So about the worst version of things, in terms of technology, like for example, the phone that you have, iPhone 15 will be the worst version of the iPhone that you will see from now on. It's true, right? Whatever AI that you see today is literally the worst version, and everyone in tech will tell you this is the worst version of AI that you will see today, right? Whatever code base that we have, we will build on it and make it better. Now, does that mean it'll eliminate some of the bumps? You'll be like, oh no, I remember this guy saying that's the worst version. No, this is the worst version, right? We'll come off that bump and get to a new high, right? Almost every single time. The cost will drop, things will rise. But for parenting purposes, I think the important thing for all of us to remember is that we're guides, right? And we must model good behavior, right? If we want our children to effectively use it, then we also must be using it effectively. For example, I'm going to go back to the driving analogy. Not looking at your phones while you're driving, right? Even if you have a self-driving car. And my kids are cringing there because sometimes I look at my phone, right? And so the interesting part is that you must first model, and then they will also follow, or hopefully will follow that. And then after modeling, you also want to make sure that they understand how to navigate into new roads. Not just the roads that you've traveled on, but hey, here are some of the signs, follow the traffic signs, and then there you go. Not knowing where the road is going to take them. Maybe there won't even be a paved road. How will they navigate that? Will they slow down or go at the same speed? Right? And so that's where you have to be very contextual about where your children or child may be in terms of their cognitive development and how they make decisions. And so we all want them to make decisions that they feel is right and that you are okay with. Because what they may do in the future may be very different. Just think about like your development, right? What you do today, for some of you, will your parents have approved for whatever decisions that you have made 30, 40, 50 years ago? And the answer is, I don't know about some of my decisions. My mom might look back and be like, all right, well, now it's okay, but back then it may have not been okay. So just give your children some grace, and our students some grace, as well as yourself some grace, that your thinking will also evolve over time, and what might that look like in the future?
Can you say the question again? I'm getting so wrapped up in what everyone's saying. I'm just like, oh yeah.
As a parent or caregiver, what tools or what would you like to see children, youth, or teens know about AI today and also in the future?
Oh, okay. I'm good. I'm back on track. So I agree with everybody, especially Mr. Norwood talking about more of like an equity lens when we're looking at technology and who's left out and for what reasons. I try to integrate a lot of discussions about that in my household, and the hope is that is another lens that they can look through, right? So they can look at things through an equity lens. They can look at things through the moral lens that we're imparting in our kids on a non-digital way. They can, use those critical thinking skills. And is this real? Is it something that I should share? Is it, how do we find out if something is real and all of that? So just piggybacking on what Dr. Lee said, giving them the ability to figure that out is going to be huge, right? Like, how do I find out whether this is real or not? And then take a pause. Like, do I share this? Do I disseminate this information further? If I do, is it going to cause harm? Talking about those things, I am thinking a little bit more now that the gentlemen up here have said this. Just, am I being transparent with those thought processes that are going on while I'm making those decisions for myself? So I would say that's probably personally the next area that I really need to inspect and look a little bit more closely at.
Right. So our panelists have filled us with their perspectives on policy, on the future of AI, on how to work with our children as their primary caregivers, as well as they've touched on the partnership that we have between parents, community, and educators and experts. Now we'd like to hear a few questions from you. So if you have a question, let me know, and I'll come over with the microphone, and we'll have one of our panelists answer. And if you could also introduce yourself.
My name is Joni Quintel, and I'm the principal of ConLab School in Palo Alto. And one of my biggest concerns is brain development and learning. When we learned 0 to 5, if you put that screen in front of their face, it's going to rewire their prefrontal cortex, and then exponential. The numbers rose with all these kids with ADHD when it was brain development because we had a screen. So what happens between 6 and 18 in brain development when we're saying, oh, as a parent, I think that's fine for you, and we don't know what's going to happen if we have more AI taking place? How does that learning stack up? What are we doing to our kids? We know 0 to 5, easy peasy. The rest of it is a huge concern of mine. The other thing, Chris, you might have some knowledge about is when I was trained to be a teacher, night and day from teacher education now. If I'm in a current teacher education program and I'm learning how to work on a gas-fueled car and my job is for an electric car, what's happening at the state level with teacher training programs to get them where they are? Because like I said, I was trained Piaget, Madeline Hunter 40 years ago.
Thank you.
I feel like everyone's looking at me because the brain development got mentioned. Academically, it's too soon to know definitively what the standard of evidence as far as what would be in there, just because, just like if you look at 5-year cancer survival rates, that's 5 years old data. And so we're, it's a active conversation right now. If anyone's read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, and he's pulling on some studies, there's some pushback that I think appeared in Science recently, and the best that we can do is, I think as humans are always just trying to bumble around and make as good of a choice as we can given as much information as we've got at the time. And so what I would say is in moderation. The thing is also with the whatever changes that may be going on biologically, the world changes too. In some respects, we need to be able to jump to lots of different information quickly and process that. Not saying that is what is all of our adult or professional lives, but the needs will be different in there. And so some of the things that we may have some anxiety about, like, we might have been dismissive of social media when it first had come out, but now there's actually some ways in which it's important to know how to navigate or think through that. In which case it's just part of the ecosystem. As far as brain development, there's a lot that goes on for adolescents that is chaotic on the brain development parts. So I'd just say hang on to your hats regardless, and act in moderation with the things that you feel as wise about as you can, and just continue to stay up to date. Not when one study comes out, there are other studies that will say something a little bit different. And so it takes a while for everything to get figured out. I don't want my kids on devices all the time, even though that might be a lot of their adult professional lives in many respects. I know for me, because I think that there's value in going out for a hike. I think that there's some nice things in doing stuff a slower way. And so just using my best judgment given all of that information. We don't know for certain. I would discourage for really young children screen usage because the interpersonal interaction is key for a lot of attachment and self-assuredness long-term. Adolescents, we do what we can.
Yeah. As someone who swims in puberty daily, I have to kind of feel it out, like where we are. So the relationship that I have with my 100-something students is critical to deciding when I can push a little further and when I need to pull back. And they let me know when I need to pull back. I do use the monitoring that the district provides us to see their Chromebooks. I can't see everything because, of course, they've found a way around that too. But I can see enough to know when they are losing attention, their ability to work at a reasonable pace slows, or they become distracted, and I know it's time to unplug. I do work closely with my colleagues, and because we're at a middle school that embraces teaming, the four of us share the 150 students that we have, and I can tell them, hey, it's time to pull back on this. Let's change our lessons and go back to paper for a little bit. Just because they get so, it's like having too much caffeine. Like for a while, like I live off of coffee. I think 50% of my blood is now caffeinated at this point, and I realize when I'm not having coffee and I need a little bit more, and it's fine, like I am functioning, but at that point also I realize maybe I've gone a little too far, and maybe I should have tea after my coffee instead of another coffee for a little bit, just to kind of reset. And kids need that too, and they need human connection, and they will let you know. I mean, there's the science to it and there's the research, but there's also relationships, and every child is an individual, and they're going to handle that technology as individually as they are, unique and different. And so there are some kids that will thrive, and there's some that will be aching for that human connection, and they will let you know. And you know your own child better than anybody. You are the expert on your child. Nobody else is. And so you have to be in touch and know what their signs are. When are they when is it too much? When do you need to go for a hike?
Trustee Norwood, did you want to add?
So there are more consumer based professional development tools out there for AI for teachers than there is infusion into teacher credentialing programs at this point, because it's still relatively new. There's still, we're looking, Milpitas Unified School District, I'm hoping that, and Chin may be able to have some more insight, is that what universities out there are doing research with instructors around AI at the different grade levels, because we're a unified school district. Again, we have TK all the way through adult learners, and AI is going to mean different things in each of those different audiences. We already have some guardrails around how early and how often you can get into technology in the school district, but we also recognize that parents are providing these access to their children. So sometimes teachers are dealing with kids that are digitally literate very, very early, where they have minimal usage, and it's creating inequities in the classroom. So when it comes to the conversation around AI, again, I'm not positive as far as what Milpitas Unified School District is doing in terms of research of what facets of AI that we are going to see most effective for our community to work on our dashboard and our academic performance, which is something I'm going to be super excited to see, because then we're going to see that move into the teacher credentialing programs versus it being third party or internal professional development that happens in school districts. But that's going to move slower than the speed of AI and the opportunity for capitalism in our country, because we're always getting bombarded. If you've ever ordered something as a teacher, you know, online, somehow somebody's got your mailing list, and they're going to be telling you about these things that are out there that are going to help make your job better, but it's not through a formalized process. So that's still coming, and I'm hoping the superintendent, working with the county office, working, of course, with Silicon Valley Education Foundation, when it comes to how are we going to develop the professional development for our students, for our teachers, in terms to be able to better inform our students.
So oftentimes the AI conversation revolves around, or whenever we talk about technology, it's around screens, right? But now more and more things are less about the screens and more about the experience. How does, like, even if you go to Universal or Disney, right? It's not really screens, it's interaction with the set technologies that engages students in a different way. And so when we're just simply thinking about like schooling, a question that I ask often with some of my colleagues is like, what is the competitive advantage of a physical school? Why even come to school? Right? If everything could be done on a screen, what is the competitive advantage that we have for a physical school? Human connection. Anyone else? Why? It's a question to the audience. Learn to use the screen better could be another. Socialize, right? Socialize with others. Another human connection. Any others?
Safety in numbers.
Safety in numbers.
Exchange of ideas that happens naturally when people are together, and also learn that those unplanned learning instances that emerge when you have people interacting with each other.
That's right. So serendipitous learning, right? And those bump occurrences. And building relationships. Make real friends, right? And see our NJROTC students actually doing real marches, right? They're not doing virtual marches. Although our band uses virtual marching tools and then goes out and actually marches, right? But without those tools, they can't do those cool Star Wars formations. It's more difficult to do so when you have to like draw that out. And our teachers' jobs back then, like they're like, listen, man, we're only doing 3 sets. That's what I've been for a long time. For those of you guys who are in the band, and then the other, I just want to bring up another set of numbers, right? And so, mathematicians in the room, please don't answer this question. But in a class of 24, for teachers, talk about teacher training. If you were to even group of 4 students, right, in 6 groups, how many different combinations can you have within that room? Put your hands down. Endless combinations? What Victoria has to deal with on a day-to-day basis, she actually has some higher numbers. Please, take a guess. A huge number, right? So the answer is you'd have to calculate by using what, kids? By using factorials, right? And so it actually, in an even number 6 group of 4, in a class of 24, would net you greater than 4.5 trillion combinations. So think about that and how our teaching credentialing programs are being taught, right? They're like, well, put them into ability levels. Does so-and-so get along with so-and-so? What is their EL levels? I mean, you can just go on and on about different combinations, but also understand that there are over 4.5 trillion combinations that could be dialed in, which, if you were to use AI tools, that could be done much more efficiently, faster, and might even give the teacher some superpowers, which will elevate the classroom time so that they can have these human connections that we can have, which is a competitive advantage in a physical school.
I would like to argue, though, that it's an art, not a science. While statistically there might be a trillion, billion, gazillion combinations, I think at any given point there's maybe 10. Because because there are some like locked in positions that require the human touch in order to understand, and on any given day, depending on if Mercury's in retrograde, I am going to need to put Chris right next to me within like, not you, Chris, thinking of a different Chris, like breathing space, like we are sharing the same air in order to get him through the day, right? So while, yes, AI could solve that humongous math problem, teachers still critical. And I do host teacher candidates as a master teacher occasionally when I have the strength again. So it's cyclical. And I do verbalize all of my thought processes for these beginning teachers and explain the art, and then do show how I use AI, which has been thankfully something that I can help new teachers with recently. How I use that to simplify some of the brain drain from teaching, which is, just a daily part of my existence, except for the summer when I get to hand over my keys. And show them, what do you use the AI for? Like, these are the things that you can take off your plate so you can refine your seating chart art, so you can get to know the kids enough so that those heterogeneous groupings can be made in a way to benefit everyone in the room and to improve the classroom climate and things like that. So yeah, we do need AI in order to simplify things that we shouldn't really have to deal with anyway. And so those are the kinds of things that I think that teacher preparation programs are really going to have to look at and really think about when they're reformulating their field experience programs, especially.
I just think this really exemplifies almost accidentally what we need to be doing in the future. So mathematics is a very powerful tool, and you can do these computations to get to 4.5 trillion. But what you also need to think about is, and it's been years, but there's permutations versus combinations. So you could do, the factorials, but you have to take into account that regarding the order, the same group of 4 is even in a different order, is still the same group of 4. And you can think, oh, this is going to optimize so that way I have like exactly the right match or the right thing. But you have to check your assumption what makes that the right match, and are there multiple possible right matches for different purposes? And so the wisdom of experience has to counterbalance but take advantage of the complexity. So, I just think that you two are sat perfectly next to each other to reflect this. I imagine you're both very nuanced on it, but that's what we need to do is, yes, you can have things that will, show all of this and suggest this, but you also need wisdom because this kid should never sit with that kid. This kid has a IEP and needs to be close to the door for the pickup or needs to be closer to the screen. These two are friends, and under these activities it's good, under these activities it's not good for them to be working together. And that's not in the, combination model from, probability space. So.
Thank you. So the ecosystem of learning for those that are in the seats as well as those who are organizing the learning experiences is truly a connection between policymakers, between technologists, between scientists, and all put together with art. And what I'm hearing is that those long standing human traditions of learning through things such as apprenticeships and internships is also a key to how we not only bring the new teachers coming into the profession up to speed, but they in turn help the veteran teachers to see what's new and how to adapt. So it's a collective process that we need to do. I think we have time for just one more quick question. Mr. Schwan, bring the microphone over.
Hi, Bill Schwan. Just had a question about, how closely, maybe you might have answered it, sorry I came a little bit late, but how closely is MUSD working with industry and companies like NVIDIA to educate parents, teachers, and the district on AI impacts, trends, directions, and faults?
Thank you. So we actually, for a very long time, have been working with many different industry partners throughout our history, and specifically around AI. We are working with Comingo. We also have, I'll just let Director Song talk about some of the other partnerships because working with industry isn't something that we do just because we have AI. It's something we've always tried to do because that's how we stay competitive. So go ahead, Mr. Song.
So we've had many different partnerships over the years, right? And so we don't work with NVIDIA directly because they're more of an infrastructure company. Now, in terms of where our superintendent may go for, ask for some funding for grants and other things, NVIDIA would be awesome. But in terms of how we're thinking about injecting like AI-related tools is more in the educational technology space. And then with our partners such as like Cisco and Google, who are providing some of the tools, the layer that is above the compute level on how we may be able to take advantage of those tools. And so one of the tools, just to come back to the grouping piece, is that we're working with a company called Grouper. It's an alpha stage product. And so what they do is you can actually put attributes on top of whatever your predefined fields are so that you can get one step closer so that you can actually make decisions a little bit faster, the human-based decisions that may be important. So that's one of the ways that we're trying to constantly stay ahead of the curve, and then also think about how we might be able to create more human-centric times, and then elevate our students' learning in that particular way.
Trustee Norwood?
Yeah, there are, Milpitas Unified School District is always looking for different types of partners. We know a number of our parents are actually employees of these organizations, and sometimes our parents make us aware of programs that are happening. I know there was recently an NVIDIA conference where they shared a number of things about the different platforms, and there are grant opportunities, but we're looking for more. We have a partner here at the MUSD Innovation Campus, KLA 10 Core, which is one of the sponsoring organizations for this. So we're looking at an advanced manufacturing pathway, which is not simply the manufacturing floor, but the engineering, the architecture, all of those different types of employment opportunities, not only for our students, but for our adults as well. So if you know someone at NVIDIA that we need to know at that level, so that, and even with our parents, we want to make sure that our kids are exposed to those types of organizations, because the work that we do at Milpitas Unified is that we want our kids to be global, but then we also want to have them the opportunity to work locally. And if they don't have the skill sets, or if they're not familiar with all the companies, not just the NVIDIAs or the Googles or the Metas, but all of the companies that make this valley go, which in partnership that do some sort of work with NVIDIA, then we're not completing our task as a K-12 plus adult operation or organization. So this is where she's going to shift, and this is where we're, how many of you are familiar with Thought Exchange by show of hands? Okay, so there'll be a quick learning lesson. This is where you all are going to be involved and have your input into this conversation so it's captured, so that we'll be able to build on our AI task force for Milpitas Unified School District.
And while she's working on that, or if you finish that early, I have an activity for early finishers. No, they're still working. There's a couple people that have done it. I did bring a device that I've been piloting in my classrooms. It's called Mirror by Swivel. It's in the back, and it has integrated AI to provide feedback on student reflections. So it's designed to increase the frequency of reflection as a growth tool in the classroom. It's still working kinks out, so I have to update that thing like every week so that the bugs work out and that new features are added. But if you'd like to try it, I have it in the back. Feel free to come back there and ask me about it or try it out yourself.
Great. Before we thank all of our panelists, I would like to thank each of you for spending your Saturday morning with us and engaging in this conversation, or as an audience of the conversation. And I do want to invite all of you to our July AI Symposium. Our date will be sent out shortly to all of you. But what we want to do is we want to make that something that's reflective of what you're interested in, what you're curious about, what your ideas are, what your concerns are. So that's what this thought exchange is. So what you need to do is either use the QR code or go to tejoin.com and then put that code in, and you'll come to this thought exchange. What a thought exchange is, if you haven't done it before, well, how many of you have done a thought exchange? Okay, so a few of you. So it's an opportunity for you to write your idea in, and then others can look at your ideas, and then they star how many stars they think, wow, that really resonates. I'm going to give it 5 stars, or I'll give it 1 star. And then through that, the AI analyzes where the themes are, and then it'll produce a report for us. So then that will provide guidance for us as we develop our AI symposium. So if you could take a moment to do that, that would be terrific. And I would like to thank each of our panelists for spending your Saturday with us, for coming across the bay, for giving up time that I know you need so that you can complete the end of the semester grading and evaluations, and also for giving your time. I know that right now you too have a lot that's going on, and particularly making sure all of the structures are ready to go, and taking these precious moments with families that each of you are away from right now. And thank you, Trustee Norwood, for sharing your insights as well and being with us this morning. So thank you. Can we give them a round of applause?